Easy.
Shawnee.
Are you dried up yet?
No, that's good. Huh?
Are you dried up?
I tell you what, I was freezing.
Who would have thunk the middle of May you're going for a run? Myself and Eric went for a run this morning at Phoenix Park, and around 1 kilometre in, you just went, Sean, my hands are numb. And I hadn't even started raining heavy yet. It was just cold in May. I was having a look at the Instagram from last year. I don't know why it popped up, the memories in the Instagram. And a lot of our posts were talking about like training the heat. I'm outside here training with tank tops on. I would post up like the running man with the flames and stuff coming out of me and all that. Not me, but just images like that. And we're talking about training the heat and go get more water in. And like the exact same time a year later, it's just absolutely dog shit the weather.
I had a t-shirt, a jumper, a jacket, and a hat on, and I was freezing. And it's about to be June.
Yeah, I had the Under Armour cold gear tights on me now, the jacket and the t-shirt.
You were like 2 kilometers in. Oh, this is a big mistake. I was like, don't you worry.
Yeah, after that, then once I warmed up properly, because I struggled this morning with first 2K. I was like, ooh, because I did intervals yesterday, and then after that, then the legs loosened up and I was grand. But when the weather started coming, the rain started coming down heavy, it was actually, I don't want to say a relief, but it was weirdly nice. And when we got 4 or 5K in, I thought anyway that once I was out of it. But had I arrived there into Phoenix Park an hour later and I was in the middle of that heavy rain, I genuinely think I would have said, Eric, there's a coffee shop not too far away. Let's just pop down there, grab a hot cup of coffee, and maybe get a run in later on this evening when the rain's not so bad. So I'm looking out now, and well, it's not blue skies. There's definitely no rain down at the moment. The roads are dried up again.
We definitely get out. But look, when you're going covering an hour and a half, you just kind of have to accept, especially where we live. Some of it could be good, some of it could be terrible. But yeah, it was. And the nice thing is, and we mention our runs each week, Sean, that we got surprised by a beep today. The watch beeped and it was 8K. We were like, what? Where did the last 3K go? And then it beeped again, 11. It's starting to get to that phase now where the progress, the consistency, as we always say, is starting to pay off. So it was nice. So even in the worst conditions, we had a change of clothes in the car. We'd everything pretty much lined up, and it is starting to get there. And then again, as a top tip to anyone, as the podcast will kind of move on to something else in this one, just if you are going out, try and have the steps for afterwards lined up: the change of clothes, a towel, a warm jumper. As you're getting changed, turn on the car, turn on the heating up full. The little things that makes it just a little bit more comfortable. Make sure there's hot water for when you're getting home, and there's nothing nicer than a warm shower after a really long wet run. It's the nicest feeling in the world.
100%. And this episode of the podcast is going to take that steps of preparation to the next step, because I don't know about you, Eric, but I've never had to change my t-shirt or clothes during a run. I've never had to make sure I've had solid food and ham sandwiches made during a run. But that's exactly what we're going to be talking about this week's episode of the podcast, because we do have Simon Greene returning to the podcast. We had him on a couple of weeks ago where he was building up towards the 64K. A quick refresher on Simon. Simon did his first marathon a good couple of years ago and broke his foot during it, and somehow got back into running again. He's living over the States at the moment. So this is just a phenomenal interview about how he built up towards the 64K, how he got on that race. And a lot of it as well talks about nutrition, how we talk about different carbs and sugars for the shorter races, and then how you might need to go more towards solid food during the longer races. Because myself and Eric, we're toying with the stage. I think you are as well. I know I am, where we get towards the end of the hopefully double marathon goes ahead this year. And if it does, it's kind of like, well, do I want to get faster or do I want to increase the distance? And I think when you start doing 3 or 4 of them, we had Barrow Valley runner on a couple of weeks ago as well, talking about increasing the distance. Simon's now talking about increased distance. You'll find more about that in this week's episode of the podcast. And some people want to go faster. After you do a couple of marathons, it's like, what's that next challenge? What's that next step? So we'll have that decision to make. I know you have it made in your way towards going towards the Ironman. I'm still in limbo on exactly what I want to do on that one. But that's me in another podcast. Today, we're going straight into Simon Greene's episode of the Any Given Runday Podcast. Guys, enjoy. Well, usually at this stage, I get a bit nervous, swing the arms. Eric usually slags me about trying to build up our next guest, but our next guest has also been a previous guest. We welcome back Eric's good friend to the podcast. I won't say mine as well because he put me down on it. Simon Greene, welcome back to the Any Given Runday Podcast. How you keeping?
How's it going, fellas?
How are things?
Hi.
Yeah, not too bad. It's Sean, right?
Yeah. It's not spelled the American way, but the font above the A. But you probably lost those tendencies living over there now. But
oh yeah, sure. I mean, I've basically lost all of my English, let alone my Irish at this point.
That's a completely different language over there. I'll try to end every sentence with a question, though, make it too relatable to you. How you getting on? For context, the last time we talked to you, you were 6 weeks out. I think it was 7 weeks out from doing your 64K run in Madison, Wisconsin. It's Madison, isn't it? Yeah. Talk us through those 6 weeks training leading up to that big event before we talk about the aches and pains of running 64K.
Yeah, I mean, most of it was pretty good. Like, I think at that stage I was still going through some, good and bad weather. So, we'd have days where you'd be able to go out in a short sleeve shirt and shorts, and then you'd have other days when you'd be out in leggings because it could be dropped down to minus 10 overnight. So, Jesus. The weather it so slowly improved into May that by the time that the run came around, it was kind of trying to decide, well, should I start this thing wearing a jumper and gloves or what? But overall, The run was great. The week before, I ran with a friend of mine. I mentioned her on the last podcast. She was running a similar but separate goal to what I was doing. So she and I've been training all winter. She's a neighbor of mine. And she ran 50 miles, which is, 80-ish kilometers. And she ran that on the Ice Age Trail, which is a trail that is close to us here. But her elevation worked out to be something like 7,000 feet over the 50 miles. Like it was just crazy. So I did because it was my last week, and I was trying to taper. I did 10 miles with her of that. And in that 10 miles alone, I think I hit 12 or 1,500 feet of elevation. So, there was a lot of like hills that just, almost crawling up them. And then a lot of like very steep downhills, which were great for me because I had fresh legs. But when I met her, she was already 20 miles in. So there was a lot of like daintily walking down some steep hills so that she didn't fall, and cliff edges and stuff. So it was pretty good.
We thought we were pretty wild in the Furry Glen in Phoenix Park today, Sean.
There was a steep hill going up that Furry Glen.
That is a steep hill going up the Furry Glen.
He picked the route the last time we would do that. So you get the race day, and we talked a little bit about this before you started the podcast. This is your first 64K, and you were talking about how you set a 5:45 pace. How much did you like? What was the first distance you done before that, and what made you go? That was your pace, because it's all uncharted territory. Like, we have an idea in terms of marathons building up towards it, but that's like how your body's going to hold up in the next 20K after that marathon is, I'm assuming, a completely different ball game. So what made you pick that pace? Had you ran close to 64K before the race day, or?
So the longest run I did in the lead up to it was probably 38 kilometers, something like that, like only just a little bit more than half.
Right.
What I was doing long run Saturday, long run Sunday. So I do 38 kilometers on the Saturday, and then on Sunday I'd get up and I'd do another 20 or plus kilometers. So I was putting in enough that I was in the upcoming weeks I was getting all the mileage in. But the reason I picked that pace was because the last time I attempted to do the exact same race, I think I might have mentioned it that the last time I was talking.
You did, yeah.
I decided that because time on my legs was not a thing I was used to, I was just going to try and do it fast and then just be done with it. I'd do it in a 5-minute pace, and when I get to the end, it'll be just under 5 hours, and I'll be grand. And that did not work out. It was by the time I got to the end, by the time I gave up at kilometer 51, it was 30 degrees. Humidity was in somewhere around 90%. I was cramping terribly, but I was just broken at that point. So this time I just said, look, if I keep a regular pace that is well below that, you know, that 80% threshold that you guys talk about, your aerobic threshold, then I'll keep my energy for much longer and I'll feel much better about it. And that's that. So I trained from the start, all the way from the start, got rid of any sort of fast running. I did occasionally, I would put in some speed work, but it was basically just 80+% of my runs were just, you know, much slower than that 5:45, like 5:45, 6:15 pace, that kind of stuff. Lots of running, lots of walking just to prepare.
It is huge. And we've spoke about it on the last couple of podcasts where it's just me and Sean talking about it and letting go of that ego again. And we touched back on it again of starting to run at a 5:45 is frustrating for anyone. Like we were cruising comfortably at a 5:30 today, but even part of us, even stupidly, I was saying, well, we are thinking about marathon times. I was like, we need to up our pace probably by 10 seconds next week and 10 seconds a week. You know, oh, you're always thinking of that pace for the marathon, that pace that looks good for you and feels good. But it's, it's how did you find just relaxing that and just, well, I suppose saying you ran 64 kilometers one way is sticking fingers to anyone who wants to put a time on it. But how do you find that in the initial stage, letting go of those fast runs? Because sometimes it is just nice to go for a quick 5K.
It was tough at the start because when I found that when I started to go into the slower pace, you know, a full minute slower, it changes the way you run. It changes the way that your foot's striking. It changes the way you hold yourself. And I felt more tired the next day after if I were to run like 10 miles. If I were to run 10 miles at a 5-minute pace versus a 6-minute pace, my muscles would be much sore because it, like, you know, you're using the muscles differently to the way you were. And so, I mean, just that was tough to get used to. And then it was a lot of, okay, well, that last mile I ran, it was just a little bit too fast. So I'm just going to have to do some walking in this next one to make sure that, you know, at the end of the day, that this is going to be a 3-hour run and not because I'm sick of looking at my watch every 5 kilometers and realizing that last 5K took me almost half an hour, that I'm just going to speed up for the last few kilometers. So it was tough at the start to try and just slow down and say, there's a reason why you're slowing down. And it's not just, you know, so that you can post a nice time on Strava. It's so that you're going to survive 64 kilometers in a few weeks' time, or whatever the distance or the time is.
So on race day, 64K, you're stepping up to the starting line. And the last time you didn't quite get it done, are you worried about pace? Are you just confident in training? Here we go. Or is it still kind of like, I'm about to hit uncharted territory over these next 5-6 hours? How were you feeling before the start of that race?
I was nervous in coming up to it. I was very confident the last time, and I fell apart at the end. So I was quite nervous this time. I definitely put in a lot more work into it this time, a lot more hours, a lot more miles than I had beforehand. But I was still somewhat concerned about it. So when I was getting ready, we started out, you know, it's the town that, so it's I think I mentioned this last time, it's a trail that runs past here, but it starts 40 miles out and then basically ends just down the road. And when we were driving out, it was, you know, 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning. And I was just thinking to myself, this is not going to start well. This is not going to go well. Just trying to get out of my head. And it was tough.
So obviously you're starting the race, and at some stage you passed the magical 42.2. Did it hit you? You just finished the marathon, you've got another 20K to go, or was it just 1 kilometer at a time, keep building? Because like I was talking to Eric there today doing a run. I was like 3 weeks before doing the marathon, and I ran a 27K, and the last couple of K I really struggled. But on race day, it was kind of like, right, you're mentally set and you're able to push yourself a little bit further. But then like 42.2 is 42.2. Like it's just a big barrier to hit that I've obviously never gone past it. And your training, you got to the 38K in your training. So when you passed that marathon mark and you realized you had another half marathon in you, how were you feeling at that stage?
So that one was not the tough one. That one was no, not at all. That was as I was running past it, I was looking at it, my watch as I hit that mark, and I was like, oh, well, there you go. That's the slowest marathon I've ever run. And then that was the only thing that really went through my head. And I had pacers, and I'll chat about them in a minute, but I had pacers with me the whole way. And I turned to my friend. I was like, oh, well, I just ran my slowest ever marathon. So this is going well. But I felt really good at that point. I knew that I was coming up because the next stop where I was going to pick up some water, because my wife was crewing for me. The next point where I was picking up water was the point where I gave up the last time. And so that was what was in my head was I felt good the last time I did this at this point. Am I going to still feel okay in 8 kilometers time? So yeah, I was not, the marathon distance was not worrying me because I knew how much more there was. It was more so the impending 8 kilometers that was coming right up in front of me.
And when you got to that 8 kilometers, the 50K mark, you were feeling good and did you know then you had it, like you were going to finish? Or
I did. I definitely did. When I hit that, I still felt great. And I was started to have, shall we say, gastrointestinal distress at that point. So I was lucky that because as you come, out that way, when you're starting off, it's nothing but wilderness and fields and swamp and marsh and whatever. But as you come in, you're heading into a city, so it gets a lot busier. And each of these trail stops thankfully had portaloos or bathrooms or something. So I was able to stop off a couple of times on the way done. But that was the only tough bit at that point. Was I was concerned that I might mess my trousers.
Yeah, I had that problem today. It was only over 12K in Phoenix Park, so I can't imagine how you know.
The problem at that distance, and I've seen it happen to people, in marathons, and there's the famous Paula Radcliffe incident. But the problem at that stage is that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. You can't stop it. And so, I prepared in the sense that I had changes of clothes in the car in case something bad happened, but I knew I was like, I can't stop it at that point because my body is just too tired. So anytime that felt like there was going to be an incident, I just started walking and just kind of hope for the best that it passes.
It must be a different approach then, because like doing the marathon, you're at a stage now where you could like pretty much run the whole thing without needing to stop. Did you find that the stop-start kind of thing, that kind of mess with momentum, or is it just because your training to it was kind of that slow running that you're able to stop for 2-3 minutes and then go back at it again, but without the legs seizing up? Because I know if I was running during a marathon, I'm like, I'm going to I'd rather keep a slow pace and keep going than stop for a minute or two. Because if I stop for a minute or two, I'm afraid I won't start up again.
So that wasn't the concern. The concern, and this goes back to conversations you guys have had on the podcast and we had the last time, is the stopping hurts your ego. It's once you're walking, you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, now this is going to make my time look bad. And that's not what I wanted. I kept saying to myself, you can't worry about that because you came out here just to do it and get it done. I just have to keep saying it out loud so that I could hear myself say it, so that I wouldn't worry if I needed to stop and walk. This is like, okay, I'm stopping and walking just for a minute or two, and then I'm going to take off again. But yeah, that was the only thing that was the concern at that stage.
Judging by people are thinking, stop and walk and all the rest. And you said you'd pacers. This is obviously not, you had big balloons popping up over your head and say, you're doing it in the 6 hour mark, or the 6:10 mark, 6:15 mark, going for the pacers. What was the pacing situation like for something like 64K? Because obviously you have fewer volunteers and stuff for that compared to what you would have for a Dublin City Marathon. Like,
well, for starters, I had a surprising amount of people come out to say hello and to cheer as I was going along. But I had some people who were set to run with me, basically from kilometer 40 to the end, or kilometer 35 to the end. I had people set to run with me, and then a day before the race, a pal of mine messaged me and said, "Oh, I was talking with your pal Mike in the bar the other day, and he said you're running the Military Ridge, which is the trail." And he said, "Oh, do you want anybody to run with you?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I actually have nobody running with me until I hit kilometer 35." And he said, "Oh, well, sure. I'm actually have to go and do 35 for my own training next week, or tomorrow. So why don't I just do it with you?" So it just worked out really well that we picked him up at his car, and then he ran back to his car with me. And he is the most even runner. I'll say second most even runner I've ever run with. I have a friend who I might have mentioned her to you before, but she runs like a metronome. I ran in kilometers with her for 35 kilometers. This is about 2 years ago. And all of her pace, all the way from kilometer 1 to kilometer 35, was either 5:15, 5:14, or 5:16 for 35 kilometers. It was absolutely unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. Now, that's just an aside. But so this fella, he's paced a professional athlete named Corey Waltering across Wisconsin before, and he helped this guy do the exact pace that I wanted to do to run 2,000 miles. So he was saying, right, let's just do the 9:30 mile pace, and he got me. If you go onto my Strava, you'll see. Yeah. I'd say most of the first 25 kilometers or so are at almost exactly the same pace. You'll notice that there's a dip every maybe 4 or 5 kilometers, and that's mostly because I was stopping where is places where my wife was meeting us with water or something like that. So I'd stop for a second and grab water or change my t-shirt or something and then keep running. And so the rest of them are just, with him, was just incredibly even. But then I had somebody pick me up where he dropped me off. And that was my friend who ran the 50 miler the week before. This was her first run out. And so she did 8 or 9 miles with me. And then at the 8 or 9 mile mark, I had a pal of mine who I had been coincidentally training to run 10 miles with me at the end, run his first 10 miles. I don't think he had run 10 miles in like 5 or 6 years. So he was doing his first 10 miles in like 5 or 6 years to finish out the run with me. So I had great support at the finish line. I had pals who met me there, and I had pals who drove from Milwaukee, which it's more than 100 miles, out the other side to meet me, and then just like stop with my wife and along the stop. So, I mean, I had excellent support. It was fantastic.
We've talked before about running being like it looks an individual thing, but it's definitely more of a team thing. But that race you just did really took it to a whole nother level. Like, you had so many different levels and people doing their first 10 miles and people who are good at pace and all the rest. It's unbelievable what you did there.
It was great. And then a pal of mine also, when he turned up right after I finished, he walked over to me and just handed me a hamburger that he had gone to the drive-thru and bought me a hamburger, which was fantastic because all I'd eaten basically for what's that?
He sounds like my kind of friend.
I'd eaten nothing but sugar for 64 kilometers, so to be able to eat something else, it was absolutely great.
And to do it, the time you did it was phenomenal. You did it 6 hours, wasn't it?
6 hours 13 minutes.
Unbelievable. So your average is just little over 2 hours per half marathon, and keeping that pace going that's the biggest compliment you're getting people off this, by the way. But that genuine that is fantastic, that time there to keep that going over 64k, because just, I mean, even that, I know you're saying yourself there, well, I passed my slowest marathon there, but that must be just after the 4 hour mark. Like if you ran it evenly, somewhere around that, which is phenomenal time as it is, before pushing on from there to get another half marathon in.
Yeah, it was 4 hours 10, I think, and my slowest marathon was my first one, which was the Dublin one where I broke my foot, which was 4:09.
I just had flashbacks to my first one with being an hour later than that. So we don't curse in this podcast, but big F you to that.
No sympathy, Simon. Shove it, Simon.
Shove it.
Oh, I wanted to bring this up, and I forgot to say it to you the last time because we were talking about different injuries and how we hurt ourselves in the races. I actually had one worse than that, worse than breaking my foot during the marathon. So my first ever 50k, I was running in the woods, and I was about 15 kilometers, about 15-ish kilometers in, and then I slipped and I fell and I cut my hand, and I still have the scar on my hand, but it was bleeding a lot. Like, it was pumping blood. And the reason wasn't because it was a deep cut. The reason was because my heart was beating so fast that it was just like pissing the blood out of my hand.
Jesus.
And so I run like this to try and cup all the blood so that it wasn't spilling everywhere. And eventually I stopped and I got it cleaned up. And it was a little sore after that because I put alcohol wipes on it and stuff. And I was nursing it and not paying too much attention. And then I slipped again. I slipped on a rock and I was trying to protect this hand. And I fell this way, landed on my elbow and cracked a rib. And
I don't do well with these stories at all.
Yeah. So I cracked a rib, and that was probably like kilometer 20-ish, and I still had 30 kilometers to go. Now, the fact that I wasn't breathing too deeply was a lot of short breaths because it was very hilly. That coupled with the adrenaline meant that I didn't really feel it too much, probably until like I'd say kilometer 40 or so. I kind of started to get a bit of a pain. I was like, oh, that's sore. And then by the time I finished, I could barely breathe. But I got to the end, but it was like, honestly, I knew it was there. I knew there was a pain there, but I didn't notice it for so long. And then when I finished, I was in a lot of pain. And then in the end, it was weeks. I was sleeping on the couch, wrapping myself in a blanket and sleeping in the corner of the couch because I couldn't lie on my back.
Yeah.
Because the pain. But yeah, I only knew it was a cracked rib because I broke a rib when I used to play American football. I landed on one of the lads after I tackled him and he put his knees into my ribs. And the doctor, he said, oh, that's not a cracked rib. If it was sore, you'd feel the pain here. And he jammed his hand into my ribs and I screamed out in pain. He said, well, you have a broken rib, but sure, we can't wrap it anyway. So we'll just leave it as it is. And so just from the pain of that, I knew that I had broken probably the same rib, but it was, yeah. So that was worse.
I can just imagine you finished at 50K and just being out of breath, and then people are like, he did great. He's just out of breath from after running 50K, which is completely understandable. Like, no, rib is cracked. You're like, nah, you're just out of breath, mate. You're grand.
But that was kind of it. I went to the medical tent afterwards, and they were like, oh yeah, just take off your shirt there so we can take a look at you. And I was like, I can't lift my right arm to take off my shirt. It hurts too much. And so they had to just take it off that way over the opposite way and just pull it down my arm so they could check me out. And but yeah, they didn't think there was too much wrong with me. But as the day went on, the pain got worse and worse. It was terrible afterwards.
Serves you right for throwing yourself down a hill, Simon.
It's true.
I don't want to finish this run.
That is as much sympathy as I got from my wife at the time, in fairness. It's very much, I do this to myself. So, you get the joy of it, but also if you break your rib, you break your rib.
Who says running isn't dangerous? Simon, I want to bring you back to the nutrition element. A lot of sugar. Over a race like that, what is it you take on board and when? How do you space it out? And how do you train nutrition-wise? What do you take with you on a run? Do you try and keep yourself eating at the same regulars? Because we have mentioned gastro issues. And me and Sean have witnessed a poor woman in the first 8K of the L Dublin Marathon. Blue shorts turned a different colour. But how do you train with that? How do you get your body used to that? Because nutrition is probably a very, 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 very big factor in that run.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and it's an ongoing exercise especially when you're looking to go into ultra distances. This time around, because every time I do like a long distance, and I do it with gels at about mile 20, right when you're about to hit the wall, I start to feel really ill. Like I get start feeling like dizzy and like almost like car sick, and I just said this time, right, I'm not doing any gels at all. I'm going to start with Cliff Bars. And have you ever had the Stinger waffles, the Stroop waffles that are there? You can buy them on Amazon. You can buy them in most of the specialty sports shops here, but they're fantastic. They're absolutely fantastic. There's about 15 grams of sugar and about 25 grams of carbs and 180 calories in each one of them. And so my goal is generally to try and get about 300 calories an hour. And then, but we'll try in the early days when I'm still feeling good to get more in. So try to hit the 350 calorie range per hour. But I was eating those two. And then I was eating peanut butter sandwiches and I was eating some fruit as well. And I also bought saltwater taffy because it was something easy that I could just stick in my mouth and slowly chew on as I was running. Now, my problem was, again, once you get to a certain point, I mean, I wasn't feeling too sick, but I was hungry but I couldn't stomach any more sugar. There was just, I got to a point where it was like my body just does not, my teeth feel furry from eating so much sugar. I would love nothing more than to just brush my teeth at this point. And so I think as I continue to extend into the ultra distance, I need to figure out what I want to eat that is going to be both high in calories, but also less sugar, because the sugar just eventually your body just gets sick of it. You get tired of eating stuff that is very sweet.
And the big crash that comes after all that sugar as well, that kind of sugar high and sugar lows and stuff. And it was quite interesting in the podcast we had with the nutritionist that was on with us last week. They were talking about milk, and I had one cyclist in a race around Ireland. All he had was milk because he couldn't stomach a big dinner. He couldn't have anything else. He was just drinking milk.
Wow. Well, don't they say that chocolate milk is one of the healthiest things that you can take for after a hard workout?
That was one of my questions to her. She agreed with it, because I heard that as well. Gal players and all are bringing their chocolate milk afterwards. I'm like, this can't be true, because if it tastes too good, it can't be that good for you afterwards. But no, chocolate milk is one of those things which just has the right amount of different ingredients and stuff in it that's good for recovery, starting that process, the good balance of carbs and protein. It's got the carbs, the protein, but also it has some sodium in it. It's got a little bit of salt in it, so you get that electrolyte replacement too. Now, I wouldn't drink it here because
pure sugar
milk. I mean, you can't even consider it milk in this country. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but I do miss the little bottles that you could buy in the centre across. Yeah.
When I came home, I actually found it so hard to drink milk after drinking the milk in America, because it was like the milk here was like soup, like it was thicker. It was just like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I'm well back into it now. But yeah, it was one of the big things I noticed the difference of. Yeah, the milk here. I've started buying. I buy it's 1.5 litre bottle of milk, and I probably pay $5.50 for it. It is the most expensive milk I've ever bought, but the reason is because they have they add all the stuff that they add in, like vitamin D and vitamin B and all that kind of stuff. But they take about half of because they add so much sugar to everything here. They take about half of the amount of sugar that's in, add to the milk, and they take that out. And then you have the same amount of sugar that you would have in regular milk in Ireland, but I now have to pay twice as much for it. I'm going to call you out not twice as much, because I have to do the research in this. Google. $5.50 in dollars is €4.52 you're paying for 1.5 litres of milk. Yeah. It's I actually might be more than that. Like, so Shannon, my wife, she will every so often goes to do the supermarket in this place that it's kind of like imagine the biggest Aldi you've ever been to, and then triple the size of it. And it's kind of like that, where they leave everything in the boxes and they put it on the shelves. But it's a place that everything's so cheap, because the only things that they sell there are grocery items that are stacked by the reps from each of these places. And so so it's absolutely fantastic. But she goes and she will go there maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks, and then I get to have the milk that is cheaper. But it's $1 cheaper there than it is if I were to go down the road here to the shop down here, where it's like $6 more or more. It's crazy money for every little milk. Yeah, in order for me to have milk that doesn't taste like I'm drinking milky sugar, I spend $6 almost on the milk. My God. It's good. If the American dream had died for me years ago, it would have died with that right there and then. That is unbelievable. Milk, man. That was one of the parts I missed the most, was milk. So it is something you're going to explore. So we might actually check back in with you and see what we do, as myself and Sean are starting to move into the longer distance. Our Sunday runs are going to become foodie runs as well. So we're going to try work on nutrition and see how it feels and see what works for both of us. Yeah, I would recommend trying a variety of things and then introducing them slowly. So when I first started into eating solid food instead of the gels, I started with a few different things. I would try like the peanut butter sandwich. I would try
I'd try to bring I would bring a backpack and I'd put it like a banana in there and I'd put like a few different things, and I would try the sandwich for an hour, and then I would try the banana for an hour, and then I would try, and just so that you can see how your stomach reacts to all these things. Now, my pal, when she came, she was like I mentioned, she did the 50 miles, and I met her at about mile 20. She pulled up, she ran up to her car, she opened up the back of the thing, she opened up a lunchbox, and she just started pouring salt onto boiled potatoes and just throwing half potatoes into her mouth.
She wasn't raised, she was dragged up. I hope she listens to that one. You can explain.
No, I tell you, I could think of nothing worse than a boiled potato sitting in my stomach, but she absolutely incredible. Now, the Russians, I think, are built stronger than we are, and maybe that's why she's able to eat boiled potatoes as she runs. But I was very impressed by the fact that she could just like eat some potatoes and then just keep going.
But when you're training and putting food in, is there a certain, like, you have to run at least 2 hours, and then during those 2 hours with the food, like, there's no point in going out for a 45-minute run and 20-minute in trying to have a bit of food and then running for another 20 minutes, is there? Or is there a minimum distance you would try to pour before you start using food?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to train with food, you want to start from doing it early. Like, you don't want to say to your body, okay, well, we're only going to do food if it's a 2+ hour run, because realistically, and this is something that I've been researching for a while now, is on your glycogen stores and how you run out of your glycogen or your basically your carb store after about 45 minutes, and so you should start to, now you can train your body to hold additional glycogen. I don't know what exactly what the limit is, but you should be taking in your nutrition or whatever you're taking from about 35 to 40 minutes in. And then depending on the amount of calories and the amount of sugar that you're taking, you should be taking it then every 25 minutes to 50 minutes. And so if it's a case where you want to start with sugar, if you're going on a 10-mile run or you want to train with solid food, you want to go out in a 10-mile run, you're going to go out for an hour and a half, you should try something small at least. You should probably try something that is 100 calories or something and just eat it at about 40 minutes in and just see how it feels on your body then. Like I wouldn't be bothering on something like under an hour to be adding nutrition. But if you're going 90 minutes or more, I would say you should be starting on your solid food at that point for sure.
Would you recommend that for people building up towards the marathon this year, or are we talking more ultra marathons?
Do you know, I would say if you want to eat solid food in the marathon, then go for it. I don't see any issue with that. I think it's a really good idea, because not everybody can stomach the gels. Not everyone can stomach the Lucozade Sport that they hand out at the stations. The only problem with it at marathons is that the aid stations aren't going to carry it for you. So what are you going to do? Are you going to put it into your pocket? Are you going to hold a ham sandwich in your pocket and run 40 kilometers with it? So it is something that you have to take it into account. Whereas on a trail race, a lot of the time there's a loop. A lot of the time I think we talked about this before, but they're basically eating competitions. So you turn up at this thing and there's a mountain of sandwiches, and there's pickles, and there's cookies, and there's crisps, and there's absolutely everything you could possibly want is sitting there on a massive table. And these tables might be every 7 or 8 miles. So, you can have the flexibility to train for something like that on a trail race, whereas it's harder on a marathon. And the other thing I'll say is that it's harder to digest that kind of food, so it's better for a longer race. Whereas if you're looking for your first marathon and you're thinking, right, this is going to take me 6.5 hours, fine. I would say let's think it's a solid food. But if you're looking to try and hit your personal best, like Eric is, you're still like, your goal is what, sub 3:30? Is that right?
3:15, yeah.
3:15, yeah. I wouldn't say solid food is a 3:15 goal.
No.
Like, yeah, you're going to want to just take the sugar. You need that to be going through your body much faster. So I suppose it depends. I would say yes, but it depends.
Lucozade is probably like $9 a liter over there, so that's that.
Lucozade is the cheapest thing you could possibly buy. I mean, I suppose it's Gatorade here, but you can buy a gallon of Gatorade, I think, for like 98 cents in the America.
98 cents for a gallon of Gatorade and half decent milk is $6. That's the problem. It's not Trump or Biden. It's that.
Yeah, you go down to McDonald's and you can buy 3 cheeseburgers for $2.50. But if you go and you try to buy a peppers are $4. So
$4 and a bag of spinach is about 6 or 7. It's my God.
And it's all free if you've got a vaccine. I saw they had the New York City mayor Bill de Blasio was kind of like he was eating hamburgers. Like if you have your vaccine, insert for it, you get a free hamburger. And then Dunkin' Donuts or something like that was like you get a free donut if you got your vaccine. They're rewarding people like dogs with food for doing the vaccine check. It's all nuts over there.
If I hadn't already had my vaccine at that point, I think I would have just said no thanks. Watching Bill de Blasio eating burger and fries was easily one of the most discomforting things of 2021 so far. It
was like dinner for a kid.
Direction.
Do you want this hamburger? So good. Acting lessons 101.
He's got like really long, gangly fingers as well. It's just terrible to watch.
There's no nice segue from that, but we'll just move on to what's the next goal now? You're going up in distances, are you? For the 64K or?
So the last time we talked, I had talked about my cycles, and my next cycle was I was planning to maybe take the distance down and go for a fast 10K or something. When I was out running on that 64K, I realized to myself that I don't think I am a fast 10K kind of guy anymore. And then I finished the 64K. I finished it though, and I was feeling in really good shape. And the fellow who handed me the burger, he said, "So do you think you'd be able to do another 40 miles?" And I was like, I mean, maybe not right now, but probably train for it. And so then the next day I started looking at 100Ks. So I'm entirely getting rid of that mid cycle of a fast 10K. I'm just going to keep ticking along over the summer, and I'm going to set myself a 16-week training pace to hit 100K in time for the end of October, which will include I've got a 50K race in September. And so I'm going to use that as my last long run in time for the 100K. So there's a couple that I'm looking at right now. There's one in South Carolina. There's one in Tennessee, and there's one in North Carolina. So I'm kind of trying to figure out which is going to be good. I wanted it really because by the time the end of October comes in Wisconsin, the weather is miserable. And, from the end of October right through until, it was May this year before the sun came out again. But, you're looking at sub-zero temperatures for 6 months. So I was thinking, let's go to California. But all the California races at that point are all the ones that you've heard of, like the Sean O'Brien, which has like 40 spots in it, and it's only ever going to be, Courtney Dauwalter and Jim Walmsley and all the famous athletes that you might be following on Instagram or whatever. They're the only ones who are going to get spots in those kind of ones. Yeah. And so I figured, right, I'll go the other direction. I'll find somewhere still warm, so maybe South Carolina or Tennessee, and find something a little bit quieter and actually get a spot in the ultra race.
Unbelievable. And things are opening up and stuff over there. I think Chicago said they're definitely doing the marathon this. It was Chicago, one of the big cities said that they're definitely going ahead with their marathon October, November.
I know Boston is going ahead with theirs.
Maybe it's Boston.
Boston are going, but they're going with a shorter or a smaller amount of people. I think they're doing 20,000 instead of 30,000, and it's going to be. I think they're going to revisit that in August, maybe right before you're ramping up to kind of make sure that if people are ramping up for or no, that doesn't make sense. They're going to I can't remember when the race is, but they're going to revisit that right before you're kind of cut off to be ramping for it.
Is that where they knock 7 minutes off the time? So to get into Boston now, Eric, it's 2:53.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing the Boston Marathon. I've decided. Yeah,
3:05 is the cutoff to be entered into the possibility if you're under 35, I think, and then 2:53 was the slowest time of somebody under 35 to be able to get into it this year. Now I keep saying to people, I'll just age into Boston. But by the time I hit 50, it'll probably be a 3:05 marathon for people over 50. There's no way I'm ever gonna to be able to qualify for Boston at this point.
Yeah, it just keep getting, you know, quicker and quicker and quicker those times. It just keeps, like, every time you think you're getting a little bit step close to it, it just gets 2 steps further away to get something there. Like, it's, but it has a certain magic to it now because it's so hard to get into. You'd be like, oh.
Yeah, I feel sorry for the people who are right on that cusp of qualifying, and then that number just keeps running away from them. You know, my last marathon race, I was like 3:26 or 3:27, something like that, and I was nowhere near it, so I didn't feel bad about the fact that my friend who I ran the marathon with, she qualified for Boston, and I didn't. I was like, it's never going to happen for me. But I felt sorry because I had a pal who was he ran a 3:02 and he didn't qualify.
Oh, it's such a mentality shift. So to say to someone you ran 3:02, like, that's a phenomenal achievement. But then they're like, yeah, but I was 2 minutes slower than my target goal to get towards Boston and everything I wanted from it. And you were at 3:26 and you're thrilled and you're 24 minutes slower, but it's still a phenomenal time. Like, it's just mad how those 2-3 minutes will change a lot.
Because I'm not trying to get into anything, whereas he's you know, technically inside that 3:05 cutoff, but still didn't get in because I think that time it was 2:58 was the slowest time. So yeah, 4 minutes away.
Let them have. I don't know. Look, people have their goals. I think I'm just happy to do anyone. You know, like, it's a case where me and Sean, who'll have us, you know, and we'll go there. We'll enjoy it. It'll be half the price. But,
that's why I'm going to Tennessee for my 100K instead of going to California, because for $100 I can get into a race over there, and there's a bed for me to sleep in. Whereas if I go to California, it's going to cost me hundreds of dollars. I might not get in. They won't tell you until you're 6 weeks out as well. That's when the actual release of the date is. So I was just if I didn't get in, then there's no way that I'd be able to sign up for any other race at that point because they'll all be sold out. So
100K is 100K. Doesn't matter where it's done. It's still a phenomenal achievement.
Yeah. Well, I haven't hit it yet, so let's.
We're quietly confident you might be able to.
No pressure.
At this point, I'm quietly confident that I'll be able to pick one to sign up for. We'll see what the rest of the year goes.
Yeah, we've already put you back on the podcast end of October to tell us how you got on with the 100K. Like, that's it. You're booked in. We have a long list of guests to get through, so we put you in this exclusive list to be booked in for there. We've slotted you in to see how you get on with that one.
Next time you can fit me in is 5 months out. It's good to know. That. Very popular.
Well, on that bombshell.
Yeah, pretty much, Simon. Anything else to add to the podcast apart from your 100K goal? Not that that's not a huge thing to add towards what's next before we wrap up this episode.
Putting me on the spot here. No, 100%. I think that's everything. You know, if people are thinking about running, you know, ultra distances, I'm always happy to have a chat with anybody who wants to. It is a lot of fun to do. It's definitely a different kettle of fish than to running a marathon, and that's mostly because of your training style changes. Like I was saying to you, it's all slow miles. You're not, you know, mixing up tempo and threshold and some long runs. It's like you're doing 2 long runs a week, and that's unless you plan to go out and spend 6 hours every Saturday or 7 hours every Saturday running, you have to break it up and you got to do 3 hours and 3 hours. It's a whole different thing. And then you got, you know, nutrition to bring onto that. That's like we said, is slightly different. It's, you know, if you're running for a fast marathon, you're going to do sugar. If you're running for a slow marathon, consider the food. But if you're doing anything in an ultra distance, you absolutely have to be eating solid food, because otherwise you're going to be thrown up on the side of the road. So there's that. But yeah. I'm going to have to hire or at least meet for a while with a dietitian between now and then, so that I can sort out these, as we mentioned earlier, gastrointestinal issues between now and when I hit that 100K race, because I can't go through that. If I'm having those issues at 64, I will absolutely be having those issues at 100. So I need to figure out how to sort that out.
It's been an absolute pleasure to listen again. I still can't get my head around it. It's one of those that until we actually cross that threshold ourselves, I don't think we'll totally understand. But it's been phenomenal to listen to it. It's an amazing achievement. And everyone who listen, some people listen that are just running their best 10K, and you know, it's great to see that it can be done over a couple of years and a little bit of dedication. And consistency that we always talk about, but it's phenomenal. Well done from all of us. It's been absolutely brilliant to watch and track your journey, and it's mesmerizing. It's probably one way to put it. It definitely makes the 16K in the Phoenix Park feel like a nice day out for me and Sean in the rain. So thanks for your inspiration. I'm sure it's been great for everyone listening in as well.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, you pretty much wrapped up the podcast there, Eric. I thought you were going to do the go home cues yourself in that one. I thought you were going straight.
I could see we're getting nervous, the usual. So that's all for this week, guys, on the Any Given Training Day. Look at his face.
Are you taking away
finish? I'll end it with the bye. Go ahead, keep on going, son. You're doing well. Take it home.
No, go on. I can't do it. You'd be crying all night. You'd be up thinking.
No, let me cry away.
You'd be messaging me and giving out that you wouldn't let him do it.
Go on, Sean. Finish it off there. No pressure.
I feel the eyes on me now. I was going to say thank you very much for listening. Actually, before we do, Simon, where could people find you? It's just basically Instagram to check up with your progress, stuff like that. Would it be?
Oh yeah, I mean, you'll find me on Strava if you want to, and then otherwise my Instagram is Ain't Easy Being Greene, Greene, and that you'll be able to find me there. It's mostly just photos of my dog or photos of trails that I'm running. There's not much else exciting going on, but you can see some videos. I posted them in my saved stories of the run that I did a couple of weeks back, so you can take a look at those too.
Deadly.
You can see also the awesome crowd I had as well throughout it. So
crowds, one thing I like running with again pretty soon. On that note, guys, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Any Given Runday podcast. That's it for myself, Eric with the big smiley head, and right now for me messing up that line, and Simon. That's it for the three of us. Take care.
Bye.